Oh,
that
that
phone.
explains. What's good, Gray?
Gray, you gotta give us
Not much.
You gotta give us your most intense evil villain impression.
Talk about
Hold
drowning
on.
hamsters.
Drowning hamsters. No, I think I got a most evil one.
Ooh, okay. Hit us up with it. This
Oh,
is
wait,
Gray's evil villain impression out here. Also, we just started the stream.
Hi, everybody. And I thank you for that beautiful introduction. I could not be prouder of everything you've done.
Obama?
It's Obama memes. He's got Obama memes.
Ah.
Hilarious.
Yep, there y'all go.
I've joined the chat.
Hey. Oh, we have one viewer. Thank you.
Oh, yeah,
Also, we just started the stream.
oh yeah.
Hi, everybody. And I thank you for that beautiful introduction. I could not be prouder of everything you've done.
Okay, cool.
Obama?
We got him out here.
Voice sounds so terrible on stream.
But yeah, wait, hold up. Let's get back to Steven's question because I really appreciated it and I think it's a good topic.
Oh, we have one
for the stream.
Oh
Also,
shit!
we got,
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see if my two brain cells can formulate the question again. So, AP,
Yes.
I've noticed that your streams and your Discord server in particular seem to attract a lot of young aspiring micronationalists. Young, I mean maybe being like 13 and under.
Yes.
So, this new generation who's becoming intrigued with the idea of creating their own nation in like their backyard. I was wondering if you view this recent surge in young micronationalists as an advantage, seeing as could possibly be able to carry the torch due to their mass number and their how young they are and their newfound interest in it, or do you feel that it could be a detriment to the micronational community, considering that they are younger and they have maybe less determination to focus into their micronation, and maybe they are, shall we say, well, I don't know. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Do you think younger micronationalists, especially this recent surge that you've been seeing, is a detriment or it's an advantage for micronationalism as a whole?
Well, I think that's a great question. Like I said
Nailed.
earlier, I think so whenever I first learned about micronationalism, that was one of the biggest issues that I saw. And whenever I started the Empire of Aeternia channel, one of the first things that I wanted to address, the way that I ended up addressing that was specifically on the topic of micronational war, and then doing things with alliances, all of those being topics that I felt like micronations that most micronations that start off, especially those that are less serious and less determined, usually find themselves falling into the same trap of, and I felt like those in particular were detriments to the community. I think being a young micronationalist is a good thing. I think the reason that those potentially more divisive parts of our community exist and have existed and have flourished, why that simulationist or why that fantasy aspect of our community has grown so much is not necessarily due to the fault of the people who became a part of it and helped to promote that. I think it's more the fault of a lack of opportunity for micronationalists. I think the people who find micronationalism and really become enamored in it, really become excited about it, are interested in the idea of starting their own nation from their backyard, as you put it. And the thing that's unfortunate is I feel like a lot of people, when they find out about micronationalism, they create their flag, their currency, their government type, they write all this information down, and then they realize that they don't really get a response back. They realize that there isn't a community that's going to flock to having them actually build this grand nation that's in their mind. And so they do things that make that feel more legitimate and find other people who will entertain those ideas and keep that fantasy alive for them. Now, again, I think that is due to a lack of opportunity, sincere opportunity for micronationalists. So I think it's an existential crisis for a micronationalist, essentially saying, what is it that you can do to continue to push your nation and make it more and more realistic? And that's kind of what I hope this channel does. So I think it's less about age and more about, one, how serious you're going to be about the nation that you make, and two, at what point in micronationalism you decide to make your nation. Because people who, let's say 5 years ago, made a nation and joined, MicroWiki, may not have been as big into Discord, may not have been as big into these communities that we're seeing now that are growing, and YouTube, for example, and are becoming more and more prominent. So I think when there are more sincere opportunities for micronationalists to make legitimate nations and to make money on their own without needing a lot of startup capital, without needing to already have essentially the funding and ability to make a nation on your own, that's when I think we'll see more and more realist and sincere nations come about, and where there will be more of a shift away from the fantasy. That's my opinion on it. I think young people coming in will probably always have a touch of fantasy or something that they're essentially overreaching their own abilities and limits to do. But I think that's kind of at the heart and soul of micronationalism, is you're saying, I want to start something unlike the world has ever seen before, knowing that I do not have the immediate resources or ability to do so. And that's what makes micronationalism, especially the mainstream community, seem like this outlandish idea. But if people who are dedicated to it and care about it and start as these young kids come into it and say, no, fuck that, excuse my language, but fuck that, we're going to find sincere ways to make money, to make this idea that we have that other people are calling very out there and very fringe into the realm of reality, that's when you start seeing things become more mainstream. That's when you start seeing people feel like, hey, if only I put a little bit into this community, if I go through the right networks and the right avenues, there's a chance for me to make a real nation. There's a chance for me to see those dreams that I've been hoping for come alive. Because before then, I think almost every micronationalist walks into the community with a smile on their face, with a flag in their hand, and ends up feeling disappointed, and ends up leaving the community, and ends up getting depressed a little bit about it, because they feel like this dream that they had of this welcoming group, this society that they would be able to see shining on a hill, wasn't there. And I think now we're just starting to be able to really build the foundations for that.
I gotcha.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. It's some pretty good justice. However, I also want to get Viren's opinion, if he's still here, because I know he wanted to speak on it, and I think he has some really interesting perspectives on it. So, Viren,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, there were some great thoughts by AP, and I really respect that. I'm not against young micronationalists, but I feel that if they really believe in micronationalism, they should actually aim their main aim should be to get proper land. This is very similar to the Republic of Molossia, to be honest, because Kevin Baugh fought a really big battle to actually get land, and he kept fighting for it because he had a partner called James, but James left because he was not determined, or he was not as determined as Mr. Kevin Baugh. But Mr. Kevin Baugh kept fighting on, and now everyone knows him. So that's the spirit that you should have, that you should continue this into adulthood if you really believe in it. But some young micronationalists, actually I've met a lot of these already in the few weeks that I've known this community. Sometimes they take it as a big joke. Sometimes they call themselves brutal dictators and declare wars, and it's just a shame. But therefore I encourage all these young micronations to start small, but aim to grow, get citizens, be considerate towards them, get land, and find some source of income, such as content creating or the imperial market, which is introduced by this empire. So yeah.
Absolutely. Viren, I think you're absolutely on point there. The thing that is interesting about Kevin Ball and Molossia is the fact that I think he is the shining example of how difficult it is to get anywhere in micronationalism. I don't think that Kevin Ball, in Molossia's current state, is really interested in becoming a full-fledged nation. I think if they were somehow miraculously granted that ability to become an equal nation, I think they might accept it. Although I do think they're not, whether based on his own interest, whether based on his pursuit of time with his family, isn't really looking to grow Molossia much more than it is in its current state. But I think,
speaking of which, sorry for interrupting, but what is the Molossia like in its current state?
From what I understand, and again, I'm not the expert on Molossia. In fact, Viren would probably be the best person to tell you because he's spoken, I believe, more recently than anybody with Kevin Ball on that topic. But from my understanding, Molossia is a piece of land, maybe a couple of pieces of land, owned by Kevin Ball that is used as a jumping off point, a platform to express his interest in micronationalism, to create content for YouTube and the internet, and to ultimately find a community and grow a community around this shared interest.
That is true, but I think, I know that Aeternia's aims are to create a community on the internet, but with my recent talks with him, I would say more that there are actually tons of people, hundreds of people who want to be citizens of Molossia. But
which one's Viren?
I'm Micronation's YouTube.
Oh, alright, you're Viren?
Yes.
Oh, what's Kevin Ball like personally?
Kevin Ball is great. I think he's a really determined man. He's really he's a really nice guy. Yeah, I think, and he never loses hope. He continues his fun activities with his family. It's good.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's what I was saying. I'll just finish that. That they are not really focused on getting popular because they are already popular, and that's because of Kevin Ball's determination. He never aimed to get popularity. He always aimed for a land that he can claim and he can rule with his own proper rules for his family. So at the end of the day, you shouldn't really aim for popularity. If you are determined enough to create a micronation and have your own thoughts and create the micronation that is in your dreams, then you will become popular.
I agree with that. I think absolutely, like you said, popularity shouldn't be the goal, or at least the end goal. But I do think that what a micronation means to somebody can definitely vary quite a lot. Like, for example, you said Kevin Ball is very, very popular. However, and has had many people from all across the world sincerely ask to become a citizen and to help him grow his nation. Those aren't in his those aren't in his interests. Those aren't where he sees his nation going, and that is perfectly fine. For the Empire of Aeternia, though, we do seek a little bit of a different route. We seek that if we are able to establish land and to start making sincerely profitable businesses out of that, that we hope if there are people from other countries, from our own, macronation, who are interested in joining us, that they can start a sincere life for their families where we are, and that is an investment in their lives which will multiply over time and will pay them back. The thing that I think is, like I said, is really interesting about Kevin Ball's story is that it does show him being one of those founding trailblazing members of micronationalism, and one of the people that got me interested in micronationalism is the idea that, like you said, when he was a child, he had a friend who he was very interested in creating this nation with. That friend ended up choosing another route in life, and he persisted. That persistence led him later on, much later after time in the U.S. military and his own ability to acquire that land as an adult, led him to the place where he is now. What I'm hoping is that through efforts like his own, in showing how long and how difficult even small steps in micronationalism can be, that what the Empire of Aeternia and what the current micronational community at large can do is know that when newer micronations come in, they are able to achieve those goals and have pathways to achieve those goals a lot quicker. That a micronation may eventually be able to come into the larger micronational community without any specific ways of earning money. They may be a child who is just on their computer and interested in starting a nation, but has no way to legally purchase land or to have any representation or to hold a job, but can yet find through that community a way to make money and a way to eventually purchase that land that wouldn't take 20 or 30 years to achieve.
I actually kind of wanted to talk on that. So, like, in regards to, like, micronations having genuine land. So, personally, AP, if I'm not mistaken, your land consists of mainly, I'd say, like, your backyard. Is that correct in saying that?
Even smaller than that, actually. So, the two territories that Eternia claims, one is an apartment, which doesn't even have a backyard. The other is a space that I am renting from another person's house in our northern territory. That one is where we do have both a backyard and a small shed that I've turned into what I call our micronational headquarters. That's very, very, very humble beginnings, yet I hope that very quickly, once we're able to save up a few $1,000s in our endeavors, we will be able to purchase a sincere plot of land that is our own, that we only really have to pay taxes on, and are able to start businesses and build homes for legitimate citizens there who wish to join us there.
Right. Well, I actually have...
Hey, Connor.
I was narrowly able to escape the pineapple Illuminati.
Oh, hey, what's going on, Connor? Good to see you.
Now I'm here.
We're glad you survived.
That's good, Connor.
The ITAL Illuminati is gone. I killed all of them.
Oh wow. He has reset the new world order.
So, AP, in regards to the question I was going to ask.
Yes.
So, especially from, I know Viren's has talked to a couple, figureheads, as you said, trailblazers in the micronational community, such as
We'll watch another video now. Bye.
the Prince of Sealand and Kevin Baugh. I know personally that specifically the Prince of Sealand, Michael Bates, he has directly shunned, like I mentioned before, he has directly shunned those younger micronationalists who start off in their backyard. And I know that even Kevin Baugh
Did you say Michael Bay?
Michael Bates.
Oh.
Michael Bay is the leader
Michael
of
Bay has a micronation? What the fuck?
He's the secret leader of all micronations. Michael Bay.
Oh, yeah, Michael Bay.
Yeah. So Michael Bates has directly shunned those smaller micronations that start off in their house or in their backyard.
Yeah, you idiots. Go freaking find an abandoned sea fort and move there.
Yeah. And
actually, to be honest, wait, sorry, because I've recently spoken to him, I would just like to say that even though he has influenced these people, he is not really for it. He told me in the interview that he doesn't like the idea of people opening nations in their living rooms, and he doesn't like that. And he says that this is the one-off thing, and Sealand is lucky to have this abandoned fort. That they have this long and actually really interesting history as to how it was captured. They fought so many battles, actually proper battles to get it. And it's actually really interesting.
Didn't terrorists fucking take it over and then SAS had to show up and save them?
Yes, if you want to find out about that actually.
And then now you have to pay microtransactions to become a knight or something.
Alright. So I'm going to finish my question for AP. So, I know that Michael Bates, not Michael Bay, Michael Bates has specifically taken shots, as Viren said, at these younger micronations that start off in the living room, saying he does not support them at all, and that in fact they are damaging the name of micronation. And I've seen from past interviews that Kevin Baugh himself has said, yeah, I don't really agree with all these like fantasy micronations and these ones that are like starting off in their backyard. AP, as a micronation that started off in their backyard, I mean, of course, everyone has to start somewhere, but as a micronation who has started in their backyard, and knowing that you have taken inspiration from these micronational figureheads, do you feel maybe insulted that these greats are kind of spitting at your feet, saying your micronation isn't really a real micronation because it didn't start off on some abandoned seaport battling terrorists, or started off in the middle of the desert with a bunch of puppets and stands?
Fair enough. Well, I think I would say the thing that I call a micronation, and the thing that Michael Bates calls a micronation, and the thing that Kevin Baugh calls a micronation are all different things. We all call them the same thing, and we're all trying to pull and push for what that definition ultimately becomes. We are all pushing we're all pushing for our own interpretation of micronationalism. And I think I'm more surprised by Kevin Baugh if that is his stance, and I'm not certain of that, but if that's
it's like
his stance.
kind of like a half stance, like he's taking like small, like,
right.
disagreements.
I think he's specifically referring to like those like really tiny ones, like the ones that like
Yes.
is like a 8-year-old's bedroom and his Minecraft server.
Yes.
Well, not just a tiny one, but like those micronations like Obsidia, which is literally just a rock and a briefcase.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so I think it is interesting. I would love to see, this is a detraction, but I would love to see an interview in Microcon where Kevin Baugh's like talking shit behind Obsidia's back, like in the same room. I think that'd be hilarious.
Yo, those Obsidia gals, I don't really know about them. Like, they just kind of walked in here with a briefcase and said they had a country.
He like
in
steals
there,
the
and they said they could
briefcase.
touch it or
and
whatever.
becomes, like, a huge
Back in
person.
my day, you had to fight terrorists and mustaches stannies in order to make a micronation. Nowadays, everybody and their grandma has their own micronation.
If you didn't fight World War II and then become a micronation, are you even really a micronation? I fought in East Germany.
You know,
Prince Michael over there, he fought.
I had to commit tax evasion in order in some Australian river in order to make my micronation.
Right. So I think
Wait,
it's
sorry,
a great
sorry.
question.
Just one thing.
Yes.
That's an interesting. Oh, sorry.
Hi Jackson. What's up?
Viren, I'm sorry. Were you gonna say something?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that's an interesting concept. Maybe it's like a trend that only when micronations start their battle or start to fight other countries, only then they actually gain popularity. Can that be true?
What, Jackson? Can you get out of my room, please?
Yeah, Jackson, get out of there.
I'm sorry. My 5-year-old brother just wandered into my room. Jackson,
Well,
why
no,
are
he
you?
just started his own micronation and declared war against you.
Did you start your own mic? You want to talk for me, Jackson? What? Okay, no, he's in my bed now.
Talk to the strangers.
Yeah, you wanna
Some
talk
very
to AP? You wanna talk about tax evasion?
You wanna talk to a fucking emperor?
Okay, yeah, he's hiding. Never mind. I'm
Did he
sorry
hear
for that.
Did he hear that? I'm
Oh.
sorry.
No, he can't hear that. I have headphones on.
So, Viren, in regards to your thing, it's not like necessary for, like, I have to have war so I can gain likes and views. No, because like AP, he's been doing pretty well for himself, and he's even directly made fun of war.
Well, so I would like to.
video.
I would like to continue my thought on what you said earlier, Stephen, and also what you said, Viren. I do think there's just a different definition of what we're all considering. I think I would understand if I were in Michael Bates' position, why he would feel the way he has. Hey, we had this once in a lifetime opportunity to claim this piece of land which was outside of the jurisdiction of our home nation, and to try and consider that a micronation. to try and consider it its own entity. I think he would call himself a micronation, but really in the sense that he's attempting to create an actual nation, or at least to have said this is something in history that deserves to be respected as something that was unique. And I think in his mind, people saying, yeah, you call your thing a micronation, my thing in my bedroom is also like that, a micronation, would be offensive, because he said, I could have died doing what I did. Why do you feel like you have the gall to call your bedroom a micronation? But I think with saying that, I don't believe he's right. I think the reason that people are calling their bedrooms micronations is because of a desire to sincerely have freedom and create their own nation if they choose to find some path in life where they don't feel forced into a specific system without their own consent or desire, and have the ability to push for their own. I think that Kevin Baugh believes micronationalism, and again, I don't know either of these people, so I can't speak for them, but I would say, I think him
Did you
saying...
just call out the grandfather of micronationalism?
I'm trying.
In spades?
I'm trying. So I think he would say, what I did, spent most of my life slowly building up this thing, which is a culture to myself and to my family, which I think is disrespectful for you to try to say that your 20 minutes of fame is equivalent to something that I built as a unique thing for myself, not looking for fame. And I think what my attempt to do is to say I am hoping to allow people all around the world easier access to not rebel against their own nations, but to allow themselves the economic mobility to free themselves from any governing entity that they choose. I think I would like to see a future where the world is democratized and the human race is democratized to such a point that if you gain enough wealth, you can leave the planet and say, I don't have to listen to the rules that were derived by people before me. I can lay out my own path. I have my own destiny. I have my own frontier to carve. And that's what I hope to do. If Molossia and Sealand have their own opinions of what micronationalism is, that's perfectly fine. But what I hope micronationalism for the Empire of Aeternia is something that comes out of nowhere and shocks the hell out of actual nations, that says, wow, this is actually becoming a legitimately competitive thing that is peaceful, yet is pulling away the interests and the hearts and minds of many of our citizens. That people are turning away from voting, that people are turning away from contribution to larger nations in support of these ones that are coming up out of the ground. I hope that we are able to far surpass the abilities of Molossia and Sealand and Liberland in what we can do. I hope one day we are an example that you can start from a bedroom, and if you have enough determination, if you have enough will, that you can make an empire unlike the world has ever seen before.
I really hurt my throat doing that boomer voice for Kevin Baugh and Michael Bay and that. And now I really want to get water, but I'm too lazy.
Yo, just drink some cheese. You'll be fine.
So, AP, something I want to add to what you're saying, and something that I've seen much in the community, just like you said earlier, like when you first find the community and you hop on board and you see everyone, there's that sense of excitement, but soon there's that disappointment, and that hit me very hard. I kind of walked away from the community for a while. I think going back to both agreeing with what you were saying, and the other guy who's basically, the old school, like, oh, how dare you guys, how dare you? I think that
Greta Thunberg? How dare you?
Shouldn't be here.
What I agree with both of what you're saying, but also disagree with both of what you're saying. I agree with what he's saying because he comes from the aspect of like conquering and land and basically independence, and that's a very true and real thing for him. And also, I agree with what he's saying that, like anyone that can start it in their bedroom, it's damaging the micronational community. Well, I agree with him. I don't agree with him maybe so much. I have a saying that I believe that people don't argue over a point, but the emphasis on that point. And I believe that what he's saying is that if there are no standards for what creates a nation or what creates a government, what creates a community, what creates a culture, then who are we to do anything? But I believe in his own mind, and I think to the hearts of many people out there, can say, but you know what, a standard was raised. And I think that I get that there's nothing wrong with the standard being raised, and I know that sometimes when there's a standard raised, there's an attitude of like, oh my gosh, well, that's how dare you, like, who do you think you are? But I also think it's important for clarification for generations. We all know the way that nature works is that the further you go down generations, the more is lost. It's very rare for new information to be added in unless it's intentional. And I think that we're at the state now in our, at least I can speak for from what I've seen in America, where a lot of young people, there's a huge identity crisis. And not only that, and this is something you've mentioned, and especially in a lot of your older videos, which were fantastic, is that there's not only this identity crisis, but there's a sense of what actually is real anymore, or what actually can matter, due to social media and the government and the economy and political aspects. And I think it's important for micronations now to really set standards. And I think one of the reasons why, like your channel, or this new one that came up a few days ago, these other different channels that really just speak on setting lines in the sand are so important to many micronationalists, is because a lot of people don't have that from their own personal home to the world around them. Everyone has the voice, everyone can say anything, and so it's very easy to be lost. And I think there's a really important aspect of saying, but there is a standard, and saying, okay, if there is a standard, then how do we go about this? And regardless of how you meet that standard, I think it's important to raise one. And even if some people are like, well, you know what? All right, and if you look at the 7 points of civilization, that's the one that I use. If we go to 7 points of civilization, that's what we're going to use to call a nation and whatnot. Sure, a lot of people call that being exclusive, saying you're pushing people away, but aren't we all bettered by challenge? The free market is grown through challenge, and I think that, yeah, it's difficult, right? It's difficult to have your own land, come up with a culture or language or economic system or whatnot, or even make friends and connect to other people. But we're here to be leaders. We're here to grow, and we're here to make an impact on history. We're here to fuck history. Excuse my language. We're here to do that. And that's not going to be done unless we... Yeah, and we have to grab ourselves by the balls. And I think personal responsibility...
We have to grab ourselves by the balls and walk outside.
I wanted to say something.
Before we get too far into anyone else's thoughts, let me go ahead and read the comments, because I know people are going to get mad at me if I don't do it. So, Grand Duchy of Asile says, I was thinking about something, but I found, first off, Mr. Random said they're the president of New Kant. In a few days there will be an election. Good luck to you in your election. Asile said, I was thinking about something, but I found my nation a little realist, mainly fantasy. I think that's where a lot of nations are. I think the fantasy is the idea that you're trying to push for, and the realist is the thing that you actually have thus far. So the more that you're able to achieve, I think the more you'll lean into realism, but that's up to everyone. I definitely agree with, I'm sorry, I'm not on the voice chat room. I think it was Gray. If Gray was the one speaking most recently.
Yeah.
No, I definitely like a lot of what you were saying. I think there should be standards for pushing yourself to realism, if that's what you're interested in. But I do think there is something to be said for excluding people. I think micronationalism should be a ladder, and that ladder should extend all the way to the bottom. I think if there's a kid in their room in a third world country who only has access to the internet and doesn't think they'll ever be able to achieve anything in their life near the standards of an actual country, they should have a way to climb that ladder. They should have something that they can go to the community and say, all I have is my time to give. All I have is my dedication to this community, and that should earn them money. They should find ways, they should be able to have opportunity to find ways to make that money. And I think that's what micronations offer. We as nations are looking for people to put in work for us in exchange for the resources we have that we can provide for them, to enrich them, which enriches us. And then I think as that ladder. I think we can always build that ladder up. My job as a micronationalist, I feel like, is to push what it means to be a micronationalist. If I am always trying to get better, if I'm always trying to reach more and more realism, that is good. But I should never, I think at the point where I ever say anyone below me is not considered a micronation, that's where I've fallen off. That's where I've lost my way, because it should be about people gaining their independence. It should be about people feeling like they have social mobility, and not saying you have to meet some standard before you're considered good enough.
And I just wanted to say something. I do think it would really help the community, if you ask me. And I'm fairly new. 2019, early 2019 is when I started really getting into micronationalism. But my personal opinion is I believe we need to make a bigger distinction between fantasy and realist micronations. Because right now, with the term being so broad, there is a lot of confusion about, and even especially with people first coming into micronations for the first time. And I know Gasanova can probably concur this, because he is much more recent than I. And I think it would be extremely beneficial if we were able to make a more clear distinction between the two concepts, you know? Because at the point we're currently at, I had a Minecraft server, like not the one I've been talking about like in the past few streams, but I had a old Minecraft server that was a fantasy roleplay server, and there was kingdoms that could expand and fall. Some people genuinely argue that that could be a micronation, and I think that that is stretching the term too much. And like when your micronation is entirely within a digital, this is just my personal opinion, by the way, is entirely within a digital like realm, like a video game, I think that is really, really, really starting to push the definition of micronationalism, and not in a good sense. I think that it, I don't know, it just kind of like what Gray said. It takes the challenge out of it, because if you're playing Minecraft and you build a city on an island, that using creative mode, there's no challenge there. The only challenge is building a bunch of buildings. And I think that really, but the problem is everybody always wants an easy way out of everything. Like, I don't know. But I do think that having a little bit more of that challenge to like establish some sort of bar, or at the very least separating those entirely digital online micronations into some sort of other category and distincting them even more would significantly help out the community in its current state.
And I agree. I think that there definitely does need to be that distinction, and the ones that I have so far notated may not be the best. Realist versus fantasy. The reason that I chose those two words for my own descriptors is because I feel like it's really hard to tell someone your thing isn't this thing that you call it by. It's a lot easier to say, okay, well, let's place it in a subcategory that more accurately depicts what you are doing. But I think it's weird for me to say I'm the judge and juror of, who's a micronation and who isn't. Now, I think it's a lot more fair to say, well, you can call yourself a micronation if that's what you're so adamant about, but you are trying to do things. If you self-acknowledge, I'm not trying to actually make a country or make something that will pursue land and specific goals that are more realistic, then you should resign yourself to considering being a fantasy nation, which there shouldn't be anything wrong with. But at the same time, that should be set aside from those of us who are trying to sincerely make countries. For example, there may also need to be categorizations and specifications for nations who are not only trying to make real countries, but potentially are even terroristic groups, ones that are saying we're gaining our freedom by going around and killing people from other nations and bombing nations and doing things like that in real life. They can call themselves micronations as well, but I would argue the way that they're going about it is much different from most micronationalists, in the same way that fantasy nations are going about it in a way that is much different from most micronationalists.
I see you made it to the end of the podcast. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on what we should fix or modify.